Hi, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about the second half of this book, which is called The Conquest of Happiness by Bertrand Russell. Chapter 10 is called Is Happiness Still Possible? And in this chapter he hints at what he will talk about in the last remaining chapters. Chapter 11 is called Zest, and in this chapter Bertrand Russell sets out his view that in order to be happy, people should have zest. He talks about Sherlock Holmes as an example because he can even get enthusiastic by everyday objects that he sees as clues for solving the cases that he needs to solve. He is skeptical that very specialized interests lead to happiness, though. He writes, very specialized interests are, however, a less satisfactory source of happiness than a general zest for life, since they can hardly fill the whole of a man's time, and there is always the danger that he may come to know all there is to know about the particular matter that has become his hobby. That's a bit why on this channel I don't specialize too much, because this channel is really a general book club for a whole host of people, and I want them to enjoy the channel. The latter part of this chapter is a bit too old-fashioned, and there are very old-fashioned bits in the subsequent two chapters to this chapter, which is a bit of a disappointment, but I still think this is a very good book because Bertrand Russell does not shy away from giving his very interesting opinions on a whole host of matters. Chapter 12 is called Affection, and in this chapter Bertrand Russell talks about the importance of affection for happiness. He writes, those who face life with a feeling of security are much happier than those who face it with a feeling of insecurity, at any rate so long as their sense of security does not lead them to disaster. In this chapter he also claims that giving affection will also make people happier, not just receiving it. Chapter 13 is called The Family. This is really quite an outdated chapter, but Bertrand Russell still has interesting things to say in it. He basically thinks the family brings a lot of happiness. He writes, to be happy in this world, especially when youth is past, it is necessary to feel oneself not merely an isolated individual whose day will soon be over, but part of the stream of life flowing on from the first germ to the remote and unknown future. Bertrand Russell wasn't a Christian, so I'm quite sure he didn't believe in an afterlife, so I can see why he thinks that having a family that will live on into the future would bring a lot of happiness. Myself, I believe that believing in an afterlife does bring happiness, but I'm sure Bertrand Russell would be skeptical of that. Chapter 14 is called Work, and in this chapter Bertrand Russell sets out his view that work tends to make people happy because it gives them something to do with their time. It also gives them opportunities for success and ambition. He goes on to write, two chief elements make work interesting. First, the exercise of skill, and second, construction. He also writes, great artists and great men of science do work which is in itself delightful while they are doing it. It secures them the respect of those whose respect is worth having, which gives them the most fundamental kind of power, namely power over men's thoughts and feelings. They have also the most solid reasons for thinking well of themselves. However, he claims that men of science are happier. But I think that doesn't really apply today because artists are seen as kind of visionaries, whereas science is almost seen as automatic. However, artificial intelligence may change that and may make people who are into science more respected in the future. Chapter 15 is called Impersonal Interests, and in this chapter, Bertrand Russell sets out his view that it's important for people to have interests outside their main careers or professions so they don't suffer from anxiety and fatigue. In other words, it gives people's brain a rest from what they specialize in, which increases happiness in his view in the long run. Chapter 16 is called Effort and Resignation, and Bertrand Russell argues here that we need to find a balance between the effort we put into life, but also be resigned to certain truths in order to find happiness. He writes, "The only man totally indifferent to power is the man totally indifferent to his fellow men," which I think is an interesting quote because power is often seen as a bad thing in this day and age, but of course good power is a good thing which we for some reason don't seem to talk about much today. Chapter 17 is called The Happy Man, and this is the concluding chapter of the book where he brings all his arguments together. I'd give this work 3 stars out of 5 because quite a bit of it is very dated, but still we can relate to a lot of what he's got to say in this day and age. His opinions are very interesting and he doesn't hold back in terms of what he thinks. I didn't agree with quite a bit of what he had to say, so that leads to me giving him 3 out of 5 for this work. Yet, at times I really did agree with him, so I've got mixed opinions on this work, basically. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.